As you are all aware, the world has been exercising a kind of mesmerizing effect on the minds of people. And everyone seems to be attracted towards yoga, whatever the reason for it is. There is an unknown, enigmatic power exerted by the very word yoga, due to which everyone wants to know what it is. That it is definitely going to shower upon a person immense blessings of an unknown character. It is something wonderful, very necessary, and a must for everyone. Isn't the feeling in almost all the people who want to learn yoga or the union mission? Yoga is the attainment of union. It also means the process of achieving this union. It is the end as well as the methodology involved in the achieving of the end known as union. But this union with what? What is to be united with what? This question perhaps is not easily answered. There is a nebulous feeling about the nature of this union, and a clear-cut answer will not be easily available to you from any quarter which seems to be concerned with the teaching of yoga. Hundreds of definitions will be provided to you, all which look perfectly sensible and logical. Yet you may not feel that you have obtained anything. You will be still searching, moving from one guru to another guru, one institution to another institution, and trying every blessed method of practicing yoga. The answer really to the great question of what this union is about will take us deep down into the very nature and structure of existence itself. Very profound is this science. The existence. You go deep into the very nature of what we call existence. While the meaning of the word existence will be clear to you all, because of the fact that everyone exists, everything exists, existing is a common denominator, a factor that is at the back of the very meaning of the life of things. There is no meaning in anything unless it exists. That which does not exist has no value. Remember that existence is a common background of every person and everything in the world. It has to be considered as covering the whole structure of life. Everywhere is existence. But in our day-to-day life, we seem to be psychologically creating a sort of rift in this otherwise generalized definition of existence. For instance, everyone feels I exist. You also exist. Here, when you conceive your existence as a myself, you will automatically distinguish this existence of myself from the existence of what you call yourself. My existence is not actually identical with your existence. If it is identical, there will be no you. For every myself, there is a counter correlative known as the yourself. Now, who is this myself? Every person in the world is a myself. Because every person refers to oneself as me. Now, who is yourself or yourself? Anything that is not myself is yourself or yourself. Please remember, this is a subtle enigma before you. Anything that is not myself is yourself or yourself. Now this yourself is also a myself from its own point of view. While I may regard you as yourself from the point of view of my feeling of myself as a subjective existence, you are also in a position to consider yourself as a myself and consider it as a yourself. Now, is there a distinction between myself and yourself? You will find we are here in a strange difficulty which eludes ordinary understanding. Who is this myself and who is the yourself? Because everyone seems to be myself and at the same time everyone is yourself. Though these two terms are totally contradictory, how come these contradictions seem to be existing in one person simultaneously? I am yourself and myself at the same time. Though the characteristics of the existence of myself and yourself are two different things altogether. Because the existence of myself cannot get identified with your existence. Else there will be no difference between people. Now, are you able to recognize the great problem before you? Are you justified in regarding anyone as a yourself? Why do you call somebody as a yourself or call somebody a Christian? Because that yourself also is a myself from its own point of view. If we are going to live in the world with this kind of contradiction in our own way of thinking, we should think thrice before saying anything, thinking anything, or doing anything. It is a tremendous mystery that we are actually facing in our day-to-day life. And we have taken for granted as if it is perpendicular. Why do you regard another person as yourself? If you are able to conceive that person called yourself to be a myself from his soul fiber. So is there an object in the world apart from the subject is the basic philosophical question. The universal is an object, the myself is a subject. The myself observes the universal as an externality, independently existing something. Are you justified in coming to this conclusion that there is someone who is not at all a subjective me or I, but totally an object? Can you say that there is anything called an object at all, really speaking? In as much as every person is everything from one's own point of view cannot be regarded as an object. But do we not make this distinction between the subjective perceiving consciousness and the object of self? You try to put a question to your own self, why do you make this distinction? In what way you can consider yourself as justified in calling yourself a determining factor in hoisting a definition on someone else you regard as an object? There is something of the nature of the secret hidden behind all this. How will you know that you are existing? What makes you feel that you are really there in some place? Have you any proof? Don't you ask for proof nowadays for anything to be accepted? Now bring a syllogistic deduction, an argument logically, to establish that you are existing. You will be wondering, the question is ridiculous. And existing is very clear, and you want to prove for it. There is a clarity which is 100% illumination that confirms the existence of oneself. But you will not grant this concession that you are giving to your own self or any other thing you want to prove in order that you will establish the existence. You cannot know the nature of your atom, so to say. You want laboratories, equipments, by means of which you can know the nature of the existence of that little thing called a material substance atom. If everyone and everything has a substantive characteristic and not an objective characteristic, there would be some fallacy in your asking for instruments which should enable you to know the actual nature, existence or structure of something which you call an object. Why don't you apply the same logic to your own self? Why don't you subject yourself to a laboratory test of observation and experimentation to know that you are really existing? You say meaningless. You want me to subject myself to an experimental technology in a laboratory so that I know that I am existing. But then why should you apply this logic to another which you regard as something different from you, though wrongly? There is a psychological rift between the operation taking place within ourselves and same operation that is taking place in regard to something that you regard as not yours. The mind of a person divides itself into two segments of activity, moving in a subjective way on the one side and characterizing in an objective way another thing on the other side. We do not deal with another in the same way as we deal with our own selves. Is it possible for you to deal with another thing or any other person in the same way as you are likely to deal with your own self? Inasmuch as you will not be able to do this and you will not like to do it also for your own personal reason, you are unjustly parading your competency in knowing all things perfectly, while in fact your knowledge of things is imperfect. An unjustifiable dissection of the types of existence that people between yourself and the others have been created by you. Yoga, as I mentioned, is an act of union. Now I am coming to the point as to what it is that is going to be united. Two realities cannot be united because a reality is something which is valid by its own existence as a total independence. An independent thing cannot come in contact with another independent thing because there is a total subjectivity characterizing the independence of a particular person or a thing which differs from the same nature that we can attribute to another person or thing. Two reals cannot join and become one because both are reals. Because if two reals can join together and become one, there must be some mistake in the assumption that there are two reals at all. In this sense, we may say that in the practice of yoga, in the attempt to achieve a union known as yoga, we are dealing with vast existence itself which stands before you as an object from which you distinguish yourself as an observer. The world stands before you as something that is observed, and you are standing apart from it as an observing subject. But don't you know that you are also a similar type of object that can be observed by other substantives who have also the prerogative of judging you. Have you heard that very famous saying, judge not, lest ye be judged? In the way you are judging another, you will be judged correspondingly. You will receive what you are meeting over another. The reason is, there is an undercurrent of uniformity between the subjective side and the objective side, which is missed in ordinary sensory perception. The consciousness that is what makes you feel a myself or me in regard to your own self cannot be observed as operating with another person. You can experience the consciousness fully, but you cannot experience the consciousness in another person. You only conceive the fact of there being consciousness in another person also by the behavior of that person, which indicates the presence of consciousness in that person also. So, the conceiving of the fact of there being a consciousness in another person is the conclusion drawn by inference. But in the case of yourself, it is a direct experience. You cannot know that there is consciousness in another person, because consciousness is pure subjectivity. The nature of consciousness is nothing but the capacity to know. That which knows cannot become what is known. That is to say, consciousness cannot become an object of itself. This is the reason why you are only inferring consciousness in other people by deductive process of reasoning, but in your case, it is a direct experience. If it is possible for you to adopt some method by which you can enter into the consciousness of another person, that person will cease to be an object immediately in yourself. There will be a commingling of consciousness which is supposed to be the true subject in you with the consciousness which also is a true subject in another person. But practically this is not possible as an achievement. By any amount of effort on your part, you cannot enter into the consciousness of another person. The other person always stands as an object to be dealt with, while you do not want to deal with yourself. Here is a basic fundamental error in the process of perception and experience in which we are deeply involved, and no one wants to go deep into this difficulty under the impression that everything is clear, all things are going on well. Action and reaction, with which process you are well accustomed, arises on account of this bifurcation of your existence as differentiated from another's existence. There is something which the existence of another results in your characterization of this person. It results in your definition of that existence, because it is not possible to dissect two segments of existence which otherwise is uniformly present in all people. Now, the yoga system takes up this question in very earnest. How would you be able to solve this psychological malady that has crept into everyone, due to which you cannot truly know what is outside? Your knowledge of your own self is a perfunctory psychological appreciation, but not a true knowledge of yourself. You cannot have a true knowledge of your own in-depth essence. You cannot know the in-depth essence of anybody else. So all knowledge is a make-believe in the sense of what we are instructed about in the educational career of our modern days. We are given the characterization, the how and the behavior of a particular person or the way of it is not known. You can know how it will behave, but you cannot know why it behaves in that manner. But in your case, you know why you are behaving in a particular manner. So that while you are applying with yourself or something very clear, it should also be equally applied to the other who stands on equal footing in the process of perception. The philosophical definition of this objectivity in oneself, standing as opposed to the existence of another, is the co-relation of the seer and the seen. How do you come to know that something is there in front of you? You will have a very easy answer. Because I see there is something in front of you. Only when you see, it is allowing the retina of your eyes to bring the light rays in contact with your own optical apparatus, which casts on your eye a reflection of what is in front of you. Opticians tell you that in the beginning it is a topsy-turvy reflection that is cast on the retina. Later, by an action inside, it gets rectified into a vertically increasing object. That's the primary question: how you have come to the conclusion that you know this object is not answer. Knowledge cannot be identified with rays of light, because no one believes that light ray is conscious. It is a physical phenomenon. An object which is far away from you like a mountain becomes an object of your mind. You are, of course, very aware that the mountain cannot enter into your eyes. It is distinct from your visual outcome. Yet you come to know that the object called a mountain exists. The knowing process is actually the function of what we call consciousness. Your consciousness establishes the existence of something which is but a mountain in front. It brings about the conscious relationship between the mountain and itself in the perception of this object called the mountain. Do you attribute consciousness to a mountain? Does it think in the manner you think? You say the mountain is a material substance. If you cannot attribute matter with an element of consciousness, matter stands always as an object of consciousness. If that is the case, and if there is always a difference between consciousness and matter, as is well known to everybody, then there is a difference between the consciousness that knows the object known as the mountain and the mountain itself. If there is such a difference between the material object called the mountain and the consciousness which is supposed to know the existence of that object, how do you come to know that it exists? The only connection that apparently seems to be between your consciousness and the object is known as the mountain, light ray, air, and space. Neither light rays, nor the air, nor the space intervening between yourself and the mountain can be regarded as conscious elements. They are all material 100%. If that which intervenes between your consciousness and the object outside is material in its nature. This consciousness which knows the object cannot be connected with the object because the connection is made of material substance. What is the relation between this material connection existing between your consciousness and the object and the knowing self itself? There is no possibly intelligible answer to this question. A material connection cannot bring about a conscious apprehension of the object existence. We have to conclude there is some other mysterious element operating between your so-called subjective consciousness and the object outside. Because the object like a mountain is materially identical, and matter and consciousness cannot come together as they are of dissimilar characters. Similar things unite, dissimilar things divide. Now, the mountain being dissimilar to the nature of consciousness, it cannot be known under any circumstance that it exists unless you appreciate that there is something of a nature of consciousness itself interlinking your subjective consciousness with the object outside. What is the conclusion? The conclusion is that your consciousness that knows the object is not connected to the object by any material content, but it has to be by an in-depth analysis of the situation, a conscious link only. Which means to say, your mind has to exceed the limit of this bodily presence. The mind cannot go so far as the mountain outside if you believe the mind is inside the body only. Don't you all think that the mind is inside you? Do you believe your mind is going outside into the marketplace? If the mind is locked up within the framework of your physical being, there is no way of knowing that there is an object outside. Unless by a logical deduction of the fact, you have to infer that this mind which apparently seems to be locked up within the body is really not so locked up. It has a wider connotation which permits its existence outside the body also. There is a larger mind than the individual mind, which is the reason why you are so-called with objectivity is able to apprehend the object outside. Your mind is touching the object. Because of the fact, it is not really confined to the location of your physical body. I give you an example to illustrate this point. Suppose there is a broadcasting station, it is in Delhi or anywhere. Somebody speaks or sings in the broadcasting station. That sound wave is carried through ether or space, as you may call it, to the receiving set somewhere, so far one from the other, and the receiving set hears the voice of the person who speaks or sings in the broadcasting station. Do you mean to say that the sound is traveling through space? The sound does not travel through space. We will all be hearing the sound here of anybody talking in the broadcasting station. The audio structure of the speech or song of the person gets converted into a vibration, an energy which is ubiquitous, existing everywhere. And the medium of that energy which is everywhere is contacted by the process of the conversion of the sound into that very energy which communicates that vibrating force to the receiving set, which retransfers the energy into the sound that you are listening. So between this sound in the broadcasting station and the sound that you are hearing from the receiver is that there is something which is not seen at all by any person. Which you cannot be contacted. But without which the connection between that sound and this sound is unavailable. In a similar manner is this question of the perception of an object. There has to be a super mind, if you want to call it, a wider mind, a more comprehensive mind, call it universal mind if you like to call it, that which operates in an impersonal manner between your individualized mind which is very locked up in your body and the so-called object which is apparently external. Now here again the question arises, what is it that this extra physical mind doing when this individual mind vibrates in a manner contactively with this universal mind? What actually takes place? The mental faculty which is superior to the individual mental faculty, the wider mind comes in contact with the object which is called the mountain. You can see even the stars, which are several light years away. How do you see them? When they are not entering into your eyes, the same process takes place. There is a larger, wider, universalized mind through which the individual mind comes in contact unknowingly, without knowing that there is this transparent intermediary separation taking place between the knowing mind and the object that is known. Another question is automatically following from this conclusion. The fact that the mountain is a material substance cannot be overlooked. Even the universal mind, which knows itself, which reflects consciousness, cannot identify itself with something which is totally material in its nature. Mind cannot contact matter unless the matter also has some characteristics similar to the mind. If you cannot conceive this fact, the reason why you are able to know an object outside cannot be explained. The conclusion, therefore, philosophically arrived at is that there is some overmind operating everywhere, even inside the structural pattern of an object which you call matter, such as a mountain. There is universal operating mind everywhere. That is readily present even in a so-called material object called the mountain, and it reacts in a conscious manner in respect of the conscious mind which is seeing the object outside, and a commingling of two centers of mind take place. There has to be something of a similar character between the medium which broadcasts the sound in the station and the receiving set. If they are totally dissimilar, they cannot come in contact with each other. There will be no hearing of the sound at all. There is therefore, for all practical purposes, a hidden content and the mystery of existence which operates universally and ubiquitously everywhere, which being unknown as an existing factor to the individual mind creates the so-called bifurcation between the subject and the object. What does yoga do there? It is a very subtle and adroit method adopted in the disciplining of the individual mind by which it can directly come in contact with that universal mind, intervening between itself and the so-called object outside. That is to say, you will directly come in contact with that object, the objectiveness, the yourselfness, you will say, of the object, either it becomes a myself in a different sense, and this myself, which is the observing factor, unites itself with the myself of that object. There is a larger me, a large I, which transcends the individual I, an experience which will include whatever you know about yourself and whatever you seem to be knowing about another. There is therefore an enhancement of perceptive capacity in this process, and when the attainment of this kind of union is becoming actually an experience, you will be actually finding yourself in a flood of experience which inundates your total personality, and you feel that which is outside you is not really outside you. The problems of life arise on account of this yourself existing as contradicting my existence. That contradiction has to be resolved by adopting such certain means of self-discipline by which the otherness of an object gets melted down to the true myself aspect of what that object is about. That is to say, yoga is a union between the true subject with the true subjectivity of another thing which is called the object erroneously wrongly. So what is the union you are talking of in yoga? It is the union of the subject with the object. But in another sense, it looks that the two cannot be united at all. So I have explained to you why. In one sense, the subject and object stand apart and they cannot be united, and in what sense they can be united. You will find in the yoga system of Patanjali practically mentioning that the problem of life arises in the contradiction between the subjectivity and the objectivity of a thing. And the separation of the objective character in an object from the subjectivity in it, in its technical language, the Prakriti aspect is separated from the Purusha aspect in the perceiving concept. In that sense, there is a separation. But in a deeper sense, there is a union, as I have indicated to you briefly in this introductory remark on this great subject, to which we have to revert later on in greater detail. Hari Om Tat Sat.